Okay. All right. Good afternoon. I'm Jasmine Reese, and I'm assistant principal at McGowan. How are you today?
Doing well.
So, can you please tell your role and title, your name and title?
Uh, Mr. Brown, I work for the district level advanced academics. I do all things high school advanced academics, and your camera is zooming in and out, but it looks like it finally has stabilized. So that entails all things from GT testing for middle through high school, as well as all things advanced academics, including well, the big thing for me is college board and advanced placement.
So, can you start by sharing in general terms what the district personnel office is responsible for and what role would look like in your position?
So, particularly for my position, it is rather interesting because I do have to work very closely with campus leadership in getting the staff prepared for advanced academics. Because what we want to focus on contains that like CCMRP, so college career and military readiness, and that's just a huge metric. So all those advanced placement classes and everything dual credit weighs very heavily on campus accountability. So one thing that we try to do is, the one of the best ways, and I know you're elementary and middle school, but just a little background or context for advanced placement. Students have to score a 3 and above, and they receive college credit. One thing that a lot of people may not be necessarily in tune with is when it comes to those advanced placement classes, the rigor is extremely high. So that college credit that you get from pretty much any high school anywhere in the country has to apply or be applicable to pretty much any college anywhere. So it has to work at like a Florida A&M, but it has to also work at like a Harvard. So the standards for an advanced placement class are incredibly high. So when it comes to staffing and hiring potential, you're essentially, I'm hiring a high school teacher, but you're not only a high school teacher,
Your college.
you're also a college professor, right? And not only are you like a college professor to some degree, we're talking about on a very tense timeline. All right. It's campus by campus, person by person, and we also put the best people in the best position. And certain courses are extremely different. We really work hand in hand. So, for example, if you have like AP Language and Composition or AP Literature or AP US History, then you're responsible for not only teaching all the college pieces, but now you have to do all the STAR components as well. So one of the things that we have to make sure we do is we have to lock in and find people who can do both of those things pretty seamlessly and get you both of the results.
Okay, that's a good segue into my next question because it's how do you approach planning for staffing each year? So we've kind of talked about that, but what major data points or trends are you looking at for that hiring personnel, like enrollment or vacancies, certification, student overall needs?
Well, it's a very unique situation because there are a couple of things we have to look at. One important factor is our teachers have to end up recruiting for their own classes. And a lot of times, if your kids are successful, it's a good class, you'll be able to grow the class a little bit better. When it comes to advanced placement, most of the time, it is very competitive, right? So when you have high school, that means they can take it at the level, they can take dual credit. They have like a lot of ways to get that college credit. So how are you as a teacher to make sure that you're getting these classes filled? And then on top of that, do you have the skill? And then on top of that, do you have the data that backs up that you actually can essentially handle this additional workload because you're doing something that nobody else can do. So there's a reason why, and it's always a very difficult balance to kind of strike between you're teaching the class for college credit, but you're not a college professor. And then on top of that, yeah, it's just a very specific skill set and a very specific type of person, which is also why not only hiring practice is important, but also just the retention in general is important because the content knowledge has to be absolutely phenomenal and it has to be wide ranging. So, for example, if you teach some of the more difficult, like some like the high level sciences, that's a very specific type of person. So, if we teach advanced placement physics, right? There's three different physics classes. You really have to not only have in-depth content knowledge to be able to teach it, because really that's like a level 1 or level 2 course.
Yes.
But also be willing to not only know it yourself, but also teach people to understand that at that level.
Okay, so how do you, with us being an HISD and working under the new education system, how do you handle district-wide priorities with that balance of the campus level needs as far as your staffing allocations go?
Got you. Well, the thing about advanced placement for the most part is that block is the block and it's its own central part. So for the most part, it is able to work within the system. And the time that we have is the time that we have. And then it matters not as much as STAR, but it does weigh quite a lot when it comes to the actual school accountability measure. So it works with the system, not necessarily separate from the system.
I love that because we know that the instructional priority of NES is very, very rigorous and it puts a lot on our students, especially as those kids are competing to get into colleges. So that can be very intimidating for them. For our next question, I want to talk about recruitment. So, as I know that HIC has a very specific hiring process, we also have teachers sign a contract and review a contract before they come in. Can you speak a little bit about what strategies you use to recruit your strong teachers, especially being that you just said that teachers have to recruit their own classes and actually fill that? How do you prepare yourself to find teachers who want to do all of that and make it more marketable to come to our schools?
I mean, just like anything else, but the strong thing is that, you know, the core is always the instruction. The core is always the instruction. The core is always the instruction. It doesn't matter if it's a pre-K class or if it's an advanced placement class. And then when I'm looking or filtering through Canvas for a particular campus, like I said, they really have to have like not only like a deep level of content knowledge, but to be able to also like share that content knowledge with others. So just the way that we go about questioning them and just understanding like what their actual background is and how they can actually execute is it's a challenge. It's a challenge, and it is a very, very rare person. So even that's why even more so important than even just recruiting those people is make sure that we keep the people that are very, very good.
Oh my gosh, I was like, that's preparing me for my next question because we know that we're in a teacher deficit, I guess nationwide, in my opinion. So when you're directing the HR, how do you adjust recruitment efforts to stay competitive, but then also pairing that with the retention? So get them in, keep them in. What are your strategies and what are your ideas?
A big thing for us is make sure that the teachers feel supported in what they're doing. Making sure that they don't feel like they're being thrown into the wolves with a lot of different expectations that are on top of just whatever they're doing as like a regular teacher. So that's a big one. Actually, training and support, just make sure that we're walking classrooms and we know what's going on and they're able to make those adjustments is its own thing. I know you said that the NES system is very, very rigorous. It absolutely is. But advanced placement is also extremely, extremely rigorous. For example, like that physics test that I just told you about momentarily, I mean, that pass rate nationwide is give the year about 30 to 40%. Yeah, it's not necessarily great. But you know, just how do we keep kids going? How do we get kids involved? Just different type of recruitment strategies. So, for example, we had like a strategy where we were cross referencing, and we kind of noticed students who did well in AP language and composition that were bilingual. Well, we need to recruit those kids to take the AP Spanish exam, and then vice versa. So we had a large cohort of kids who would take AP Spanish and language and composition, which is the entry level AP Spanish class, and then they wouldn't take any other AP classes. Well, hang on now. So if you're proficient in a Spanish language course, then why aren't you taking the English course as well?
Yeah.
And we've had some success in recruiting and growing classes in that way as well.
Okay, so if the students are doing all that, when it comes to hiring the teachers, like, do you have a performance task that you would like to do throughout the interview process to make sure that they're qualified and actually have that content language capacity? Like, what are the interview protocols or performance tasks that you might give a candidate for that level of teaching?
Well, like I said, we work hand in hand with the campuses, and sometimes we do have like allow direct influence, and sometimes we don't. It kind of really depends on the actual campus, but a lot of it comes from if they have like a core understanding of the college board metric. We'll look at one thing that's like really, really important that I've used is one like the second or third questions after I kind of ask about all the content language is okay, you have, let's say, an AP psychology class. AP psychology can be taught a couple of different ways on a couple of different pacing scales. Okay, you have 60 days and you have to get through this many units. How would you break it up?
Yeah, okay.
And just like tasks like that, can you decipher what's important, what's not important? Can you look at the actual guidance from the College Board curriculum? Decipher what needs to be hit and how fast. Because when it comes to AP, every single day matters. You still recording? Yeah, you still good.
I don't know. Okay, gotcha. Okay, so now I want to talk about once they're hired, we talked about the process, we talked about what it looks like for recruitment, we talked about what we need, but let's talk about induction, what it looks like when they get there, and then the compensation balance. Because I would imagine if I'm coming for a high school and I know I have a college level background, but I'm teaching high school, but it's also college. What's my compensation look like? How does that work? And then what is the process of onboarding look like for those teachers on a high school level?
It's going to roughly be the same as anybody else because you don't necessarily see it as you're like a college professor, because like I actually don't
Want you to think
I
that?
actually don't look for college professors because it's a
Okay.
very different thing. So the one thing that makes advanced placement very, very difficult is if you look at any college standards for like, let's say like an entry level English class, they're actually